Hi, it's Jo and Steve from Freshagenda, and we're here, Steve, with a bit of an update, bit of a review of the Global Dairy Trade event from this week, and also just talking about how we're going to approach our outlook given the impact of COVID-19. So, GDT first.
GDT first, a fairly negative result for milk powders. The fat stayed quite positive, reflected some of the short-term urgency might be out there in meeting retail markets. There were lower volumes offered this time round. That's just the usual seasonal decline. Look, good news, there was improved Chinese buying, back up towards normal levels, but certainly not all the way back up to where they normally are in milk powders. But overall demand was weaker, and that naturally drives the price down. I think this, within the results, you can see the results there summarised, and there's been plenty of analysis out there and people know what happened, but I think it's interesting to note that there's, like for like, the losses were heavier than were reported. So when you compare the actual products rather than the averages, you've got, and there I've just pulled out two, regular skim milk powder and, regular whole milk powder and medium heat. There was some blending of an instant product which made it a lot better for whole milk.
On average. But when you look at those products, they're fairly significant falls, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. And I'll think of the reasons or why this has happened in this way. We'll come on to the next couple of slides because it's really caught up in the global impacts. So swinging that segue into we're in progress with our March outlook. We'll do a quarterly review, so it's a bigger piece of work and it's a bigger deck. Clearly separating effects of turmoil which are dominating the impacts on markets right now from background fundamentals which almost seem like, they're academic. They're going on in the background, but they're interesting. Again, we're building this into scenarios, into a scenario for COVID impacts. There are two phases of this. We call the disruption phase. So we're seeing, that great dislocation of trade, consumer demand, and the impacts that probably have on how producers deal with that.
And supply chains adapt,
And then the unwinding of that as things hopefully come back to normal and we see lockdowns removed. And then there's obviously a big impact on incomes here. So there's a consumer change in habits that's coming as we go into a recession phase in the second half of 2020. So there'll be some adjustments made there. We do have some other big variables in the background. We can't lose sight of those. We've got milk supply building.
Yes, at just the wrong time.
At the wrong time. And naturally, with all those changes, we've got some changes in product mix undoubtedly going to happen. So our update's going to be out at the end of March, early April.
For subscribers to the Global Dairy Direction. So it'll be an interesting one. But I guess the key thing is build scenarios and go back to them and adjust as things develop, because it's a daily issue that's rolling.
Absolutely daily. So stripping the impacts into two columns here, this is what we are, naturally everyone's grappling with these things, but left-hand, short-term impacts of COVID-19 across the commodities, they're the main points we're seeing, and that's what's impacted GDT. The anxiety about the global financial volatility, the extreme volatility we're seeing, hitting the milk powders. We've certainly got some examples we know that buyers are sitting back. So markets go into free fall, buyers sit back and wait. You don't need to jump in now. Let's just see where this goes. It's a bit like the share market, I guess. Where there's no one buying, no one bidding.
That's right.
There's there are complex effects here when we start to think about what's happening in food service channels, because there's virtually the complete closure of food service channels in some Asian countries that we've seen. Some of that is starting to lift, but that's just arriving in Europe and the US. So that is naturally going to see some channel shift. It won't all be about cheese stopping because there's no pizzas and no burgers. There'll be a lot of home delivery, a lot of takeaway, and a lot of supermarket buying.
And retail, that's right.
To replace that. On the right-hand side here, we do have some complex. I should point out here that the red lines, as if no one worked that out already, the red lines refer to negative price impacts, the black are positive, and the blue is uncertain.
We don't know.
So the swathe of red on the left-hand side, and more balance, a bit more black on the right-hand side. The fundamentals were good. And that's still going to play out. We do have rising milk volumes in Europe, which is and the US, which is one of the things that have been that's been changing gradually. But yeah, I'm sure people have got the ability to freeze that, look at those points, and think about them. That'll be more important on this page. So we're building a comprehensive scenario for COVID.
Yep.
With variables, and there's a time dimension to many of these variables, as you can see, the left-hand side there, across the coming months. As abrupt disruption occurs, we're going to see changes in demand and supply impacts across these major regions. Mm-hmm. I combined the US and EU there, but that's really a simplification enormously.
Well, they're at similar stages, I guess, of the outbreak and similar responses, which is why they've been combined.
There may be some different impacts in how demand plays out.
Yes.
In that regard.
Yeah.
So we'll make some disruption assumptions, then we'll make some ongoing that reflect the reduced impacts, essentially recession type outcomes and its impact on consumption.
So we've looked back at a few other incidents, haven't we, Steve, just to see what the impact might be, and obviously US cheese demand is the big one.
There's not a lot of guidance for what's happening.
Yeah.
But with the amount of data you get from the US, we can look at 9/11 and GFC, when consumers were absolutely spooked or had less income. You had those two events. So cheese demand year on year fell for a short period of time during the GFC with that big income shock. So people adjusted. There was a period of, I think it was sort of 6 months or so, where we had negative growth, not big, less than 2% declines. But you can see on the right-hand side there the huge shift in channel purchases that the mozzarella and other cheese varieties in the US speak. Consumers swung to retail.
Yeah.
And ate more at home, and it changed the mix of spending, obviously. And you see that happens over time. When conditions get tough and eating out gets more difficult, they switch.
Yeah, they're the inverse of each other. So that's something to watch as this rolls out.
The difference this time is that we have income hit and channel disruption, and almost channel closure. So the impact on cheese demand is the big whack here that and its consequences for product mix.
Yep.
What it means, and so I think powder markets are reacting to the fact there might be
a
much
bit more around.
More milk going to dryers to cope with that. And speaking of impacts on prices, naturally that's flowing back to farm. Not back to farm yet.
No.
But here's some indicators of the returns to product streams. US on the left-hand side, and that's in cents per kilo US, and the right-hand side, the dive in spot prices and in futures markets will flow through to farmers, probably mostly in the second half. So we won't see a supply response yet
for some
time. What's also going on here is that naturally feed prices are falling at the same time.
Yeah, so the margins might be protected somewhat. As that happens. Yeah.
But it's certainly going to shock milk prices as well. So a chart that you've selected this week just keeps the good news flowing.
Yeah. Chart of the week from our Dairy Globe newsletter is really around that production piece in Europe, Steve. And you can see just coming out of pretty mild winter conditions, heading into spring, and we're seeing that uptick in production.
Year on year.
Oh yeah, which is been fairly it's moved around, but that trend has been fairly well sustained. So here comes the milk from Europe.
So one thing might be slowing a little bit down is that they've had plenty of rain lately, and that might make fields boggy.
Especially in Ireland, and the UK to some extent, it's slowed things down a bit. So
that may be some sort of saviour and may pull that growth back a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. We're sorry we haven't got a lot of happy news, but that's the way the world is right now. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.